According to the theory of evolution, the origin and development of the universe and all its systems can be explained solely on the basis of time, chance, and continuing processes. All living things have arisen from a single-celled organism. A second and opposing worldview is the concept of creation. According to the theory of creation, everything in the universe has come into being through the design, purpose, and deliberate acts of a supernatural creator. That means this creator created the universe, the earth, and all life on earth, including all types of plants and animals, as well as humans.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to Origins. My name's Don Chapman, and it's my privilege to be your host. Origins is a forum where we take the evidence of science and we use it to validate the truth of creation. And we do that by interviewing some exciting creation scientists and folks who have done great research and study in this area. Today we have kind of a special show. It's a little different than anything we've ever done. We're going to introduce you to a DVD today called Evolution, the Grand Experiment. And Dr. Carl Warner is with us, who has produced this great video. Dr. Warner, how good to have you with us.
It's so great to be here. Thank you, Don.
Now, you're a graduate of the University of Missouri, and you're a physician by trade.
Yes.
And you were a physician by 23. You must have been a driven man and obviously a very gifted man. But what got you into wanting to talk about evolution?
Well, this came to me. I didn't go seeking it. I was in medical school. I was 19 years old. I believed in evolution. And a friend came to me and said, "Carl, you believe in evolution?" I said, "Well, yeah." And he says, "How do you deal with these problems?" And he presented to me 3 questions that changed my life. He said, "You believe that the Big Bang occurred, formed the universe out of the Big Bang. How do you form matter for the universe out of nothingness?" And then he showed me that this is a violation of the first law of thermodynamics. And I thought to myself, that's very interesting.
Something from nothing.
Something from nothing, and that's a violation. His second question to me was this: "Carl, you believe that life formed from chemicals to begin evolution. How would you explain this, knowing that DNA does not form naturally from chemicals?" And I thought to myself, he's right. I know this from biochemistry, but I've never applied this to evolution. And proteins don't form naturally, and functional cell membranes don't form naturally. And I said, well, I don't know. Then he presented to me the fossil record. He said, "Carl, we have hundreds of millions of fossils. Why are there gaps between animal groups that, seemingly go against the theory of evolution?" And at that point, I realized I was challenged, that there was something wrong with my way of thinking. I believed in evolution, yet he just more or less decimated my ideas.
3 questions took the pins out from my head.
Took the pins out, and now I was confused. I thought, you know what, I have to go look into this thing.
Now, there came a point where instead of just pondering these things in your mind, you began to go out and do research, which eventually led to this DVD.
Well, I talked my wife into going out and forming a television production company so we could get access to the information. And basically, this allowed us into the dinosaur dig sites, it allowed us into the museums, it allowed us entree to the professors. And we started to go around the world filming interviews, going to the dig sites. We went to and interviewed a who's list of evolution scientists. Dr. Johansen, who discovered Lucy. We interviewed Dr. Gingrich, who discovered Rhodocetus, the famous Rhodocetus. We interviewed Dr. Hussein, who did the discovery of Ambulocetus, the author of the book Dinosauria, the curator where Archaeopteryx is found. We not only interviewed them, but then we had them take us and show us their fossil collections. Show us this evidence for evolution that you say is here. We want to see this. We interviewed Dr. Oxnard, who was questioning at the time the validity of the fossil Lucy, and the late Clark Howell at Berkeley, who led the Ethiopian expedition in the Oma Valley there. In all, we did approximately 60 scientists and carried out the interviews. But that was only the first phase of this whole thing. The second phase was then we went to the dig sites. I wanted to see the fossils, the actual evidence. And so we traveled all over the world. We went to Solnhofen, Germany, where Archaeopteryx was found. And we went to the Iguanodon dig site in Belgium, where they had found the 29 dinosaurs in the coal mine. And we went to Dinosaur Provincial Park, where they had found 10,000 dinosaurs. And we went to Fossil Butte, Wyoming, where they had found 1 billion fossil fish in the fossil layers there.
1 billion.
We went to Neanderthal dig site and interviewed the curator from the Neanderthal Museum in Mettmann, Germany. We went to Petrified Forest, where the 10,000 acres of petrified trees are. We went to the Badlands, where fossils are found there. We went to Agate Springs in western United States. We went to Thermopolis, where 200,000 dinosaur bones were found. We went to the Messel dig site in Germany, where 600 bats were found fossilized. Dinosaur National Monument. We went to Mygat Moor. It becomes, you know, after a while, the list is so long, and it becomes overwhelming, the amount of information that we collected.
And yet, even after visiting all those sites, you weren't done.
I wasn't done, because then we realized, when you go to the dig sites, you see very few fossils because it takes a while to get them out. We decided then we'd go to the museums and photograph the fossils in the museums that had been taken from these sites. And so we started photographing fossils and photographing entire museums. We started and we went to, for example, went to the Carnegie Museum and filmed the fossils there. We went to the Redpath Museum in Montreal. We went to the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, the Museum Victoria in Melbourne, and Harvard Peabody Museum. These fossils then became the backbone of our research, because now we had the information, the source material, and we could then carry out this experiment to test evolution.
Over 100,000 miles.
Yep.
60 interviews with some of the most prominent evolutionary scientists in the world.
Yes.
And then visiting both the dig sites and the museums that
Yes.
house the fossils.
Yes.
This is an incredibly extensive research project. You started in 1997, is
1997, and we traveled, you know, to Australia and all throughout Europe, all over North America. Plus, besides this, we also did nature photography. We filmed at the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, underwater diving there. We filmed in Australia. We went up to Alaska to observe the glaciers. And all the while we're comparing nature, what's going on today, to the fossils and the events that happened in the past.
It's incredible research, but some fun along the way, I hope.
It was a great experience. It was a kind of a unique opportunity. And, you know, the public believes that scientists can't be wrong. Scientists know that scientists can be wrong, you know. And I questioned, when this all started, is this one of these big finds, like when we discovered that the Earth wasn't flat and it was round, you know, hundreds of years ago? Or when Galileo and Copernicus put together that the Earth wasn't the center of our planetary system? Is this one of those big blunders that I've stumbled upon, that the whole paradigm is going to have to shift because evolution doesn't work out? Or do I just not understand it? Knowing this, that scientists can make blunders, I then pursued. I had the openness to pursue this, because I tell you what, scientists have been wrong in the past about big things.
Prior to Charles Darwin, scientists had some rather strange ideas concerning how life began. They believed that living organisms came into being rapidly and spontaneously over a period of just a few weeks. The scientific community believed in spontaneous generation for 2,000 years. And it is a stark reminder that even a majority of scientists can be wrong. In his classic 17th century description of spontaneous generation, scientist Jan Baptist van Helmont suggested that mice came from dirty underwear.
Wanneer je een stuk gedragen ondergoed, if you put a piece of sweaty underwear in an open-mouthed jar, together with a piece of wheat, after 21 days the ferment coming out of the underwear changed the wheat into mice. But what is even more amazing, is that the mice are not small or aborted mice, but adult mice emerge.
Another evidence offered for spontaneous generation was the rotting meat experiment. 17th century scientists observed that if meat was placed in an open jar, maggots formed on the meat weeks later. They conjectured that life, in the form of maggots, arose spontaneously from rotting meat. But in 1668, Francesco Redi, an Italian physician and scientist, overturned this idea. He suggested this proof of spontaneous generation was nothing more than contamination of the meat by flies. When flies landed on the rotting meat, they laid their eggs. Over time, these eggs grew into maggots. Later, the maggots changed into flies. When scientist Redi prevented flies from landing on the meat with a piece of cheesecloth, maggots never formed. A third evidence for spontaneous generation was the 19th century pond water experiment. Scientists took pond water, boiled it, and poured it into an open jar. After a few weeks, the sterilized water was now teeming with bacteria. Soon the water became cloudy. Scientists suggested this was proof of spontaneous generation, that bacteria arose spontaneously from the sterile water. They scoffed at anyone who dared to question their conclusions. In 1859, spontaneous generation was finally rejected after the French Academy of Sciences held a contest to see if anyone could definitively prove or disprove the theory. Scientist Louis Pasteur stepped forward. Pasteur theorized that cloudy water did not represent spontaneous generation, rather contamination. He suggested that bacteria in the air seeded the water in the jar. To prove this, he sterilized water in an S-shaped glass. The opened end of the glass pointed upward and allowed air in, but bacteria could only settle in the neck and were prevented from reaching the water. After months of waiting, the liquid in the flask never became cloudy. With this experiment, Pasteur disproved spontaneous generation once and for all, and this first scientific natural explanation for the origin of life collapsed. Today we can learn from the failures of the past. A scientific idea, theory or law may be believed for thousands of years by a majority of scientists, only to be proven wrong. All scientific theories and laws should be open to scrutiny, even the theory of evolution.
It's not science unless you can question and falsify it. Unless you can say this is false, this is wrong, it's not science.
You know, scientists are just as much prone to holding on to old ideas as anyone else, and many of them are very conservative.
But there's always a chance with new evidence that we may find that there's a fundamental error in our thinking. You know, no scientist ever says never, and no good scientist ever says always.
It comes down to what you bring to the questions to begin with. If you don't want to see things, you're not going to see them. And we're all guilty of not wanting to see certain things.
Carl, you said that one of the three things your friend challenged you about that got this whole experiment started was that there were problems in the fossil record. Could you give me an example of some place where there seems to be a gap or a problem?
These gaps are problematic throughout the fossil record. I'm just going to show you bats here. 1,000 fossil bats have been collected. Now that's a lot of fossils, and these are beautiful fossils. Now if you would have that many fossils, and if evolution was true, you would expect to find ancestors of, let's say, a ground mammal changing into a bat if you have 1,000 fossil bats. But the problem is there's not a single ancestor for any bat. The bats just appear suddenly, almost like it was a creation.
Almost like it was created.
Mm-hmm.
Bats are warm-blooded flying mammals. Some bats use sonar-like echolocation to catch their prey. An amazing 1,000 fossil bats have been collected so far. Many of these are complete bats. Some show breathtaking minute detail, such as wing membranes, fur, and even stomach contents. Despite this rich fossil record, Darwin's predicted intermediates have not been found. There are no fossils showing a ground mammal similar to a mouse, slowly changing into a flying mammal, a bat.
You would guess that there'd be some sort of a bat precursor, but once again, nothing. Bingo, they just show up. And so, I mean, as you might guess that, you know, there are certain people that think they were specially created. They actually are kind of a problem with the creationists who like to, you know, if things were created, here's a very highly complex mammal with all these adaptations, and bingo, they just show up at some particular moment in time fully formed as a bat. Obviously, we evolutionary biologists and paleontologists don't believe that, but at this point we don't have a good fossil ancestor for them.
When did bats evolve from the land animals? When is it theorized?
Well, it's also, that must have happened also in the lowest tertiary. But we have no evidence for this evolution. Also the bats appear perfectly developed.
We don't have any non-flying bats. And so we can't pull something out of that, any kind of information out of that that tells us how they might have evolved.
What period of time did the bats evolve, do we think?
We have no fossil records of bats during the Cretaceous period. And this means that we are only depending on speculation when it started and what happened in that time. Of course, when we have the oldest bats, like Icaronicterus, they were completely developed in their morphology and their flight apparatus, and also the messel bats were completely developed. So we can only speculate.
Opponents of evolution have seized on this lack of evolutionary intermediates in the fossil record. They ask, how many more bats would have to be collected before one declares the absence of ancestors a reality? For them, the fossil evidence of bats clearly speaks against evolution.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, bats aren't the only animal where we have a problem finding ancestors or transitional forms, isn't it? That's also true with fish.
Fish are yet another example. In fact, the whole fossil record is the same pattern. Let me tell you about fish. They have collected 500,000 fossil fish. 500,000.
That's an awful lot of fossils.
They've collected 100 million invertebrates, you know, animals without backbones, but they can't connect the invertebrates to fish. The fish just suddenly appear.
Scientist John Long is one of Australia's most eminent paleontologists and is the head of science at the prestigious Museum Victoria in Melbourne. He has studied fossil fish for years. He reports that the fossil fish collections of the world are immense.
How many fossil fish are there in museums? Well, I visited some of the biggest museums in the world to study their fossil fish collections, such as the Natural History Museum in London and the American Museum of Natural History. And I'd say conservatively there'd be hundreds of thousands, probably maybe up to 500,000.
Although fish have the most abundant fossil record of all the vertebrates, there are no fossils showing invertebrates, such as jellyfish or starfish, slowly changing into fish. Nor do the fossils show the formation of a spinal cord over time, as Darwin predicted.
There's a lot of debate over the origins and diversity of the first jawed fishes, the gnathostomes as we call them. That's still one of the great mysteries and problems to be solved in vertebrate evolution.
Despite a 150-year search for evolutionary ancestors, every fish family appears suddenly in the fossil record.
Every major kind of fish that we know anything about appears fully formed. There's not a trace of an ancestor for any of these creatures, and there are no transitional forms suggesting that these major kind of fishes evolved from a common ancestor. Now, evolutionists know that. They say it is true, but they believe in evolution anyhow. But evolution is impossible. The origin of fishes, that's the origin of vertebrates. That would be the most astounding, important event in all of evolutionary history. We should have book after book after book written about the origin of vertebrates. We should have picture after picture of all these transitional forms. There's nothing. The fact that the vertebrates, the fishes, appear fully formed, no trace of ancestors, no trace of transitional form, destroys the theory of evolution. Evolution cannot be true.
Scientists who support evolution still hold out hope that they will eventually find these fossils.
The evolution of fish is still very much debated amongst paleontologists. And I think that within the next 10 years we'll probably get some resolution on the origin and interrelationships of the major groups of fishes. All we really know at the moment is that the bony fishes came from one of these primitive groups, but we don't really know which one. So there's still mystery and some debate over where the true bony fishes came from.
Scientists who oppose evolution suggest the absence of fish ancestors in the presence of 500,000 fossil fish speaks resoundingly against evolution.
There just aren't any ancestral fossils. We've looked at bats and we've looked at fish. Are there other animal examples?
Yeah, we went and interviewed all of the seal evolution experts in the world, and we said, how many fossil seals have you found? 1,000 fossil seals have been collected. That's a lot of fossils. And then we said, could you show us the animals that evolved from what they think is a skunk, went into a seal? Can you show us these transitional fossils? And there are none.
Skunks become seals.
That's what they said.
But there's no fossils to show it.
But no fossils to show it.
Seals are often mistaken for sea lions, but they are an entirely different family of mammals. Unlike sea lions, seals move on the ground like a caterpillar in an undulating pattern. Also, seals do not have visible ears. Evolution scientists believe seals evolved from the skunk and otter family.
Fossil seals are allied to a completely separate group of carnivores, the mustelids, the skunks and otters.
Over 5,000 fossil seals have been identified, but all of the predicted evolutionary ancestors are missing.
We don't have such a material. We already can say this is true seals according to morphology of the bones. We cannot say, I don't know what is this, it has so many features. And it's not a time where we can find this missing link.
According to opponents of evolution, finding 5,000 fossil seals without evolutionary ancestors contradicts the theory of evolution.
So the evolutionists aren't getting any help from the seals. There's no ancestors there either.
No ancestors for seals, no ancestors for bats, no ancestors for fish. It goes on and on and on.
And that's pretty much a pattern through the whole fossil record.
The whole fossil record goes that way, yes.
Now, surely dinosaurs would be the saving proof here, because dinosaurs are so key to evolution, right? What about that? Is the opposite true?
You know, most people, when they go through a museum and see all these dinosaurs, they think, oh, this is proof of evolution. But I hold a different view. Are you aware that all of the major animal and plant groups have been found with dinosaurs? In other words, the fauna of the animals with the dinosaurs was similar to today. For example, they found ducks with dinosaurs, flamingos, avocets, hedgehogs, possums. All of the plant groups, all of the animal phyla have been found with dinosaurs. Number one, that's a fallacy that the faunas were different. And number two, they don't have ancestors for any of the dinosaur species. They have collected, Don, 100,000 fossil dinosaurs.
That's a huge number.
3,000 of them are full skeletons. And yet when we interviewed the scientists, they said we do not have a single ancestor for any of the dinosaur species. Nothing.
The idea of dinosaurs roaming our planet seems almost imaginary, but evidence of their existence is undeniable. Some of the plant-eating dinosaurs were over 90 feet long and weighed 30 tons. Meat-eating dinosaurs had huge serrated teeth and powerful jaws that could rip apart any foe. Paleontologists have recovered 3,000 dinosaur skeletons, plus bones and teeth from 100,000 dinosaurs. The remains are so voluminous, they cannot all be displayed, many being relegated to museum basements. Despite this enormous collection of remains, no ancestors have been found for any dinosaur species, even Tyrannosaurus rex.
Wherever we try to put tyrannosaurs in the phylogeny of the branching history of theropod dinosaurs, they have a long missing record. And we're going to find that record one of these days.
We're certainly lacking information that ties together meat-eating dinosaurs and all the rest of the dinosaurs.
Even the plant-eating ornithischian dinosaurs have this same fossil pattern. A plethora of fossils, but no direct ancestors.
We haven't really any idea how the whole other group of dinosaurs called ornithischians, exactly the timing of and the way they branched off. We've got nothing there yet. There's a huge gap.
Despite finding hundreds of skulls for the plant-eating dinosaur Triceratops, no direct evolutionary ancestors have been found.
Triceratops heads are just pretty common. I've heard tell that there are at least 50 different individuals just based on skulls alone, and that's probably complete skulls. And who knows how many partial skulls would increase that number. I suspect we probably know, 100 or hundreds of Triceratops from their skulls.
Many dinosaur evolution charts, such as this one from the Chicago Field Museum, imply that the ancestors of dinosaurs have been discovered. But when the solid lines are overlaid with the actual number of dinosaurs found, the chart tells a very different story. Opponents of evolution suggest these museum diagrams are often misleading and do not reflect the fossil evidence.
The diagrams don't always reflect the fossil evidence. Boy, that's a powerful thing to hear. Carl, what an incredible job you've done as the executive producer of this. I just think the church and really anyone interested in truth is indebted to the hundreds of thousands of miles that you've traveled and the effort and the work that you've done. What a tremendous thing you've done. It's a joy to have you here on Origins. I hope that many of our folks will get the book, get the DVD, get the study materials, especially those with children, that they'll use them to at least open up minds to seek truth and to ask the right questions. Thank you so much for your great work. It's a great privilege to have you here. Folks, just because scientists say it's so doesn't mean it's so. We've seen many examples in history where scientists worked from wrong presuppositions for a long time until the truth sort of reset the dial and made them think again. And I think that may be true with the theory of evolution, and it may be time for people to realize that God is our creator. It's God's view He created you. That should be your worldview too. We hope to see you again here soon on Origins, and until then, God bless you, my friend. Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to Origins. My name's Don Chapman. It's my great privilege to be your host. Origins is a forum where we take the evidence of science and we use it to validate the truth of creation. We have a fantastic show for you today. We are going to be talking to the executive producer of Evolution, the Grand Experiment. And it's one of the frankly, best done DVDs I've ever seen in the whole creation evolution debate. And before we meet our guest, I want you to watch the introduction to this tape so that you'll see what a quality product we have for you.
For thousands of years, most believed in a creation account, a spectacular event in which God spoke, creating stars and planets, animals and sea creatures, birds, plants, and human beings. In 1859, the scientific and religious establishments were rocked by a new theory, one with a twist. Charles Darwin proposed that all living things developed through an exceedingly slow process over millions of years naturally. He shockingly suggested that man was not created by God. Rather, man evolved from apes and other lower animals. In his day, Darwin's book was a phenomenon which drew a firestorm of criticism. His theory created a conflict between those who believed in a six-day biblical creation and those who ascribed to this newly proposed, slow, natural evolution. Now, 150 years later, evolution is the dominant theory for the origin of life in most scientific and academic circles. Many scientists are concerned that the public has not embraced the theory of evolution. Gallup polls have repeatedly shown that most Americans do not believe that life formed naturally over millions of years. Rather, they still believe that God created the world and reject any theory that is not based on supernatural explanation.
I believe that something had to put us where we are. It's too big, it's too universal for us to just evolve from one cell.
Did we come from monkeys? I don't know. There's evidence for it, but then there's also some stuff missing. So, making that leap between, with a missing link there, I know I have some problems with it.
Only 13% of Americans believe in the purely mechanistic theory of evolution, that humans evolved from apes, and God had no part in the process.
You know, yes, I do believe in the theory of evolution, because I figure we have to come from someplace and, from ape to man to where we are today. Yes, I do. I definitely believe in evolution.
Do most reject evolution because the theory is implausible? Do they not believe because of their religious views? Or is it because they are unfamiliar with the theory? Darwin's evolution theory remains a divisive issue, but this conflict is nothing new. Even before Darwin, there were other natural explanations for the origin of life that conflicted with the biblical story of creation.
Well, we have Dr. Carl Warner with us today. Dr. Warner is a graduate of the University of Missouri. He is a physician by trade, but he has this incredible interest in the grand experiment, in looking at evolution and seeing if it's true. Dr. Warner, it's so good to have you with us.
Great to be with you.
Now, by the way, your DVD, it debuted here on Cornerstone Television Network, didn't it?
Yes, it did in 2009, and we're very appreciative for Cornerstone giving us that opportunity.
Well, we are thrilled to have it be a part of what we do here. One independent group said that this was the best documentary on the whole creation-evolution debate that was ever done. The more I watch, I tend to agree with that assessment. It's great having you, and what an incredible labor of love this has been. 30 years you've been working on this.
Well, this came to me. I didn't go seeking it. I was in medical school. I was 19 years old. I believed in evolution, and a friend came to me and said, "Carl, you believe in evolution?" I said, "Well, yeah." And he says, "How do you deal with these problems?" And he presented to me 3 questions that changed my life. He said, "You believe that the Big Bang occurred, formed the universe out of the Big Bang. How do you form matter for the universe out of nothingness?" And then he showed me that this is a violation of the first law of thermodynamics. And I thought to myself, that's very interesting.
Something from nothing.
Something from nothing, and that's a violation. Then he said, "Carl, you believe that life began from chemicals to begin evolution?" I said, "Well, yes." He said, "How could that have occurred, since this violates the ideas of biochemistry that DNA does not form out of chemicals and proteins do not form out of chemicals? How could you begin life without DNA and proteins?" And I thought, my goodness, that's a good argument. Then he presented to me the fossil record. He said, "Carl, we have hundreds of millions of fossils. Why are there gaps between animal groups that seemingly go against the theory of evolution?" And at that point, I realized I was challenged, that there was something wrong with my way of thinking. I believed in evolution, yet he just more or less decimated my ideas.
3 questions took the pins out from my head.
Took the pins out, and now I was confused. I thought, you know what, I have to go look into this thing. So I began what later became a grand experiment, testing the theory of evolution, going and traveling all over the world to settle this for my own question. And I can't take all the credit for the DVD. There's a lot of people that contributed to this project. For example, I don't know if you noticed the great narrator, Andres Williams from London, who's done Discovery Channel and the like. And then the music was scored by Simon Wilkinson from England also. And he did a fabulous job. And the videography was done by my wife, who has a great talent for that. Our writer, Carla Zara, my director of photography, George Tikachek, and there's a whole list of people. I'm going to probably miss somebody, but a whole list of people that made this project what it is today.
One of the things that I've learned being in the ministry is that nobody can do real ministry unless God builds a team. And when the parts of the body come together correctly, then it's incredible what God can do.
Yes.
Well, today we're going to talk about whales. You've done some groundbreaking work on whales. It's kind of, most people, unless they've really studied this area, don't know that Darwin, in his first edition of Origins of the Species, informed us that whales came from bears, but not just from any bears, from black bears.
Yes, you heard it right. Many people say, did he say bears?
Yeah.
Whales from bears? And yes, Darwin wrote this in the Origin of Species, the first edition. And he almost got laughed out of London. His friend said, "What are you talking about? Bears going into whales?" He says, "No, I really believe this." They said, "Charles, you're going to lose this whole argument before you get started. You better yank this." And he eventually took it from The Origin of Species, and even though he thought it was correct.
Whales are magnificent creatures, capable of holding their breath for over an hour and diving to over 1,000 feet deep. But where did they come from? Scientists who support evolution suggest whales evolved from a land mammal. For them, the fossil evidence is so convincing, the evolution of whales is offered as one of the best fossil proofs for the theory of evolution. However, scientists who oppose evolution argue that this fossil evidence is unreliable. Darwin thought that whales might have evolved from bears. In The Origin of Species, he wrote, "In North America, the black bear was seen swimming for hours with widely open mouth, thus catching, like a whale, insects in the water. I can see no difficulty in a race of bears being rendered, by natural selection, more and more aquatic in their structure and habits, with larger and larger mouths, till a creature was produced as monstrous as a whale." Modern evolution scientists have abandoned Darwin's idea of a bear evolving into a whale.
So the modern evolutionists have abandoned Darwin's bear-whale theory, but whales are very significant to even the present day evolutionary community, because they believe this is one of the places where they have the best ancestral chart. Is that right?
Yes, they would say the evolution of ground mammal to a whale is the best evidence they have. And I then decided to systematically look into this. And I got the evolution charts for how this evolution would occur. And I started asking questions. The first thing that struck me is, why does everybody have a different animal that evolved into whales? For example, the California Academy of Sciences says it was a hyena that became a whale. A different museum says it was a cougar-like animal that became a whale. Another one says it's a wolf-like mammal. Darwin says it was a bear. That seemed odd. Well, which one was it that became a whale? Then we started to decipher the charts and say, show us the fossils here for this animal. And we realized that the charts reflected something quite different from reality. The scientists actually had created the fins and the tail, the whale's tail, on the animal called Rhodocetus. And we were interviewing him on camera, and this revelation became known. It was stunning.
This is a powerful segment from Evolution, the Grand Experiment. And I just want our folks to look at this, because when they go to a museum and they see these charts, they don't necessarily have to believe everything they read.
Don't believe anything unless you can see the fossils.
Scientists at the University of Michigan suggest whales evolved from this cat-like animal because of the similarities in the teeth, while scientists at the California Academy of Sciences believe this hyena-like animal evolved into a whale because its teeth are similar to some extinct whales. Biologists in Japan suggest whales evolved from a hippopotamus-like animal based on similarities in the DNA. Detractors of the theory ask, if whale evolution is so clear, and if the fossil record is so abundant, why can't evolution scientists agree upon which land mammal changed into a whale? There is great excitement in the scientific community over the discovery of a few important missing links between a land mammal and modern whales.
But what's good about these particular fossil whale specimens is that they do show us intermediates in the evolution of whales. And we don't often get fossil intermediates, so we can actually trace the development of characters. Say, for example, the evolution of swimming in whales. We don't often have that opportunity.
They have a big exhibit on it in Michigan. I was just there. They have all these things just sitting out there. I mean, they're all there. I mean, you really have to be blind or 3 days dead not to see the transition among these. You have to not want to see it.
As shown in this diagram from the University of Michigan Natural History Museum, Ambulocetus is one of the important transitional fossils in whale evolution. It is thought by some to be a walking whale.
Just in the last 5 or 10 years, we've had some remarkable discoveries of fossil whales. And in fact, there have been discoveries that have indicated that fossil whales had feet and actually walked on the land.
Frankly, I don't know why they could call that creature a whale. I have never seen a walking whale, and I've never seen a pig that flies. And they suggested some of these creatures were intermediate. Frankly, I just don't believe it. They believe that because they want to believe it.
Recently, some evolution scientists have backed off the assertion that Ambulocetus was an ancestor of modern whales because its eyes are high up on the head, like an alligator's eyes, quite dissimilar from whales and land mammals.
Ambulocetus may be on a slight sideline, and we think that mostly because it's very strange. It has its eyes raised up on top of its head in a very strange way, and it's unusually large for an early whale. But mostly the eyes up on the top of the head seems like an unusual specialization. Maybe it's not on the main line.
Evolution scientists claim the most spectacular intermediate fossil in whale evolution is Rhodocetus, an animal with 4 legs, a whale's tail called a fluke, and flippers. It would swim using its widened tail fluke like a modern whale, but it had 4 legs like a land mammal. A perfect transitional fossil between land mammals and aquatic mammals, just as Darwin predicted.
The fossil whale that appears a little bit later is Rhodocetus, and this animal had large tail vertebrae that indicate there were lots of room for muscle attachment. So here we see the beginning of the type of locomotion that's characteristic of the modern whale, using just the tail flukes for propulsion and not using the hind limbs.
We have a complete modern whale type structure in Rhodocetus. There are not many modifications from Rhodocetus to the modern whale other than changes in size of the structures.
When this video series was being filmed on location at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, the executive producer noticed a discrepancy between museum drawings of Rhodocetus and the fossils. The reconstruction of Rhodocetus had a whale fluke, but there were no fossils of the tail to confirm this. Dr. Phil Gingrich, the scientist responsible for the discovery and reconstruction of Rhodocetus, was questioned how he knew there was a whale fluke on Rhodocetus, since that part of the fossil was missing.
What was the reasoning that the scientists think there was a fluke on Rhodocetus based on the other pieces of anatomy?
Well, I told you we don't have the tail in Rhodocetus, so we don't know for sure whether it had a ball vertebra indicating a fluke or not. So I speculated it might have had a fluke.
Scientist Gingrich also acknowledged that the flippers were drawn on the diagram without these fossils. Now, he does not believe this animal had flippers. Again, his answer was surprising, since the museum diagrams had flippers on Rhodocetus.
Now, since then, we've found the forelimbs, the hands, and the front arm, the arms, in other words, of Rhodocetus. And we understand that it doesn't have the kind of arms that can be spread out like flippers are on a whale. And if you don't have flippers, I don't think you can have a fluke tail and really powered swimming. And so I now doubt that Rhodocetus would have had a fluke tail.
Many experts consider whales to be the best fossil evidence for evolution, but are unaware of these discrepancies. Opponents of evolution contend that whale evolution is nothing more than hopeful supposition. If museum diagrams are redrawn and corrected for various discrepancies, opponents argue that whale evolution is non-existent.
That's unbelievable, Carl. Absolutely unbelievable that you went to the man who made the drawing, put the flippers and the tail on Rhodocetus, not from any evidence, but from his assumption, and all the other scientists read his things as if it's the gospel truth.
And it collapsed during the interview.
And as soon as you show it's an assumption, there really is no evidence at all.
The whole thing collapsed.
What makes people want to believe or think in the first place that a whale had to come from a land animal?
Well, whales and land mammals are both mammals, or warm-blooded, and so they have thought in the past that maybe a land mammal could become a whale through volition, hoping to get a body part that it needed to swim or whatever, but life doesn't work that way. The only way you could get a body part for swimming would be by an accident, and it would have to be a monumental accident of letters of DNA, 900 of them, being inserted into the DNA of the reproductive cells. When you look at the odds of this happening, it's unbelievable. Let me just say that.
This goes to a cardinal belief of Darwin's, doesn't it? That through volition, animals could change from one animal to another?
Yes, and Darwin was wrong on this. He was wrong on use, he was wrong on disuse, he was even wrong on the idea of adaptation. Scientists today, biologists who believe in evolution, have rejected this idea that you could adapt by a need in the environment.
Darwin suggested that the survival of the fittest, or natural selection, was another mechanism for evolution. He thought that nature would favor the strongest varieties within any species, and the weakest would eventually die off. The surviving varieties would improve over time, and eventually evolve into a completely new species. Some scientists argue that natural selection does not have the power or capacity to theoretically cause evolution. They contend that this process can only select or remove traits for a species, but not create new body parts. To better understand their argument against natural selection, one has to go no further than an animal breeder, who uses the process called artificial selection. Artificial selection mimics natural selection, but instead of nature making the reproductive choices, a breeder makes the decisions, consciously. In both processes, there is a limit to how much can be accomplished by breeding. For instance, dogs have a limited number of genes or variations coded in its DNA, such as color, shape, or size. Using artificial selection, a breeder cannot go beyond these limits. Breeders have created a 4-inch tall Chihuahua and a 3.5-foot tall Great Dane, but they cannot produce a 10-foot tall dog or a 1-inch dog. Breeders can select for dogs with short hair or long hair, but they cannot produce a dog with feathers. Natural selection and artificial selection can only promote characteristics that are already present in an animal's gene pool, but cannot add completely new genes or body parts to any animal species. Scientists who support evolution have recognized this limitation of natural selection. Now there is a new theory of evolution to explain how animals could theoretically develop new body parts, such as wings, or eyes or feathers. The new theory of evolution, called Neo-Darwinian evolution, suggests that animals did not evolve by effort, need, or as a direct response to the environment as Darwin thought. Rather, mutations in the genes of the reproductive cells would cause one animal to slowly change over time into another. This new theory of evolution suggests that a carnivorous land mammal became a whale by accidental mutations.
In trying to understand the evolution of whales and dolphins from four-legged terrestrial carnivores, the first thing you have to keep in mind is that chance plays a tremendous role in this.
Scientists who oppose evolution suggest that changing one animal into another by accidental mutations is preposterous. If a carnivorous land mammal, such as a hyena, evolved into a whale, too many body transitions would have to occur by chance. The hyena's front legs would have to change into pectoral fins. Its back legs would have to disappear. Its nostrils would have to move to the top of its head and form a blowhole. The hyena would have to develop a dorsal fin by accident. Its bony tail would have to change into a cartilaginous fluke. The hyena's hair would have to nearly disappear and be replaced by blubber. Its body would have to increase to 80,000 pounds, and its external ears would have to disappear and change for high-pressure diving. Each of these new traits would require at least one new structural protein. Each protein would in turn necessitate adding 300 letters of DNA to the genetic blueprint in the proper sequence. This would be equivalent to a blindfolded toddler typing several pages of meaningful paragraphs into a completed book, or to a person throwing a die thousands of times in a row, and each time it came up as 3. Given these improbable odds of evolution occurring through accidental mutations, some scientists are now questioning the theory of evolution.
Some scientists are now questioning the theory of evolution. Carl, it's been wonderful to talk about whales, especially when you stop and think this is supposed to be the strongest place where we have the strongest evidence for transition, and there isn't any evidence for transition.
No, when you look at the gaps, it's incredible.
Yes.
And if this is the best they have to offer, the theory is over. The theory of evolution is over.
And it's just that no one's announced that yet, I guess.
Yes.
Or when it's announced, it's not heard. This is the book, folks. I just want to tell you what incredible work this is, both in the information and the quality with which it's done. It's a tremendous thing. And then the DVD that goes with it that we've been watching, and these are available, aren't they, sir?
Yep. The book also, I want to mention, has a teacher's manual to
Yes.
it. You can use this as a homeschool family, you can use it in public schools, and you can use it in parochial schools. And the book has 600 photographs that my wife took. And the book is as important as the video. So it's an integrated project,
Sure.
and you can watch the video, you can watch the book, or you can do it as a class, or you can just do it as an adult.
And I would say to my fellow pastors out there, there's also a PowerPoint set that we could get to use this in teaching.
There's a PowerPoint set, and then there's also the next series is Volume 2, which is Living Fossils, talking about animals that were the same during the dinosaur time. It's a book, it's a video, and a teacher's manual also.
Sounds like great material. So who do you envision as the audience?
The audience is you know, whoever you are. It could be a 5th grader. It could be mom, it could be dad, it could be grandma. And you could also use the books as a tool to reach out to other people, because there's no mention of God in the book. We don't mention that name because it's a science book. So you won't offend someone from Harvard or some science professor. Just read this book. It's Evolution, the Grand Experiment.
Actually, we quote their professors.
Yeah, that's right.
Not only are we going to offend them,
your
we'll
favorite
quote them.
scientists are in your book.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, you have done an incredible work, and in such a unique way. I just love the fact that the evidence that you're presenting is coming out of the mouths of the evolutionary scientists.
Right.
And they're damned by their own admissions, and I think that's great.
That's the most credible information when it comes from the evolution scientists. If a scientist opposed to evolution gives the evidence, well, maybe it's tainted. But they're giving the facts, and then the audience gets the opportunity to say, that makes no sense, or there's a big gap there. You know.
It's such a unique approach, and it's so well done. Thank you, sir, for the incredible work that you're doing and that you have done. And I just want to urge our viewers to go to www.thegrandexperiment.com and to get a hold of some of this material. It's powerful material that I believe God can use in your life, and especially if you're talking to others who have questions, this is material that you would want to use as you share with others, because it is done by world-renowned evolutionary scientists, and it's done so very well, and it's done in a non-controversial way. So I think it's powerful material that you would want to use. You know, friends, we're so delighted here at Origins that we can have people like Dr. Warner with us to share what God is doing. And I do think that the day is coming when more and more people are going to have to simply admit that the evidence for evolution isn't there. You know, from the very beginning, it's always been God's view that He created you. And that should always be your worldview, too. It's been great having you with us here on Origins. Look forward to you joining us again. And until then, God bless you, my friend.